The air in the arena was heavy, thick with the smell of stale popcorn and ozone, and heavier still with the sense of predictability. We, as fans, gather in these modern coliseums for one reason: to be surprised. We chase the feeling of a moment that breaks the script, a moment that feels real. But that night, the script felt written in permanent ink. The champion stood in the ring, bathed in a smug, arrogant spotlight, the championship gold gleaming around her waist. The crowd was making noise, yes, but it was a tired, rhythmic noise. The boos were a reflex, not a rebellion. The chants for her were a ritual, not a passion. She was the unmovable object, the dominant force, and the story, it seemed, was over. She had defeated her challenger. She had silenced the city. And as she grabbed the microphone, the entire building seemed to sigh, bracing for the lecture, the "I told you so." This, we all thought, was how the show would end. Not with a bang, but with a sneer. We were wrong. She began her speech, the words landing like stones in a silent pond. She listed her accomplishments. She dismissed her rivals. She called herself the Empress of this era, and frankly, no one could argue. The commentary team was already delivering their sign-off, packaging her victory as just another inevitable data point in her historic reign. The minimalist animation of this moment would show a single, tall figure in the center, and thousands of smaller, slumped figures surrounding it. Everything was exactly as it was supposed to be. The lights were bright, but the narrative felt dim. She paced the ring, her boot steps the only sound besides her own voice. And then, she decided to twist the knife. She decided to dig up a ghost. She leaned into the microphone, the smirk on her face turning cruel. "This era is mine," she said. "Unlike those who came before. Unlike the ones who couldn't handle the pressure. Unlike the one you all still cry about." The crowd knew the name before she even said it. The air crackled. She was going there. She was about to disrespect the memory. The one hero who had left the ring not in defeat, but in tragedy. She was about to name the one person whose story ended with a doctor's note instead of a final bell. She said the name. She said, "Evangeline." She spat the name Evangeline as if it were poison. A martyr, the Empress called her. A memory, a ghost who was broken and forgotten. The crowd's predictable boos suddenly sharpened. This wasn't performance anymore. It was real anger. They had mourned Evangeline. They had mourned the career-ending neck injury 2 years prior, a light extinguished at its absolute brightest. The Empress soaked in the hatred, raising her microphone to laugh, to deliver the final cutting eulogy on her forgotten predecessor's career. And in that tiny, fractional pause, a breath taken before the final insult, it happened. The arena lights did not dim. They died. Absolute, terrifying, plunging darkness. A collective, singular gasp from 20,000 people. The champion, frozen mid-sneer, was just a silhouette. And then, the sound. It wasn't music, not at first. It was the sound of shattering glass. An audio cue so iconic, so unmistakable, that it bypassed the brain and went straight to the soul. The crowd didn't cheer. They screamed. It was a sound of pure, primal disbelief. The arena exploded in a way that shook the cameras, the audio feed peaking, distorting into a wall of white noise. People were grabbing their heads. They were grabbing strangers, shaking them. Is this real? This wasn't a return. This was a resurrection. The Titantron, the giant screen, flickered to life. And the name appeared, letter by letter, Evangeline. The reaction doubled. This wasn't part of the show. This was the script being torn to shreds. The cameras, for a moment, didn't know where to look. They panned wildly, searching the darkness of the entrance ramp, blinded by the strobes of her entrance music. But the real story wasn't on the ramp. Not yet. It was in the seats. It was in the reaction. Row 12, Section 104. A man in his 40s, a fan since he was a boy, clutched the railing in front of him, his mouth wide open, silent, as tears streamed down his face. He wasn't crying from sadness. He was crying because the impossible had just happened. Further back, a young girl, no older than 10, who had only ever known Evangeline from her father's old YouTube clips, was just staring. Her jaw was on the floor. She was seeing a myth made flesh. The minimalist stick figure animation of this scene would be a sea of blank faces, and then one by one, hands shooting up to cover mouths, hands gripping heads, strangers embracing, jumping up and down in a shared, frantic energy they couldn't contain, a current of pure euphoria passing between them. This was the sound of 2 years of communal grief, of what-ifs, of tribute videos, of end-of-an-era articles, all of it being instantly, violently converted into raw, unfiltered joy. This was no longer a wrestling show. It was a mass emotional exorcism, and Evangeline hadn't even taken a single step. And then, from the smoke, she emerged. Evangeline. She stood at the top of the ramp, not in her old, vibrant colors, but in simple, stark black. The fog swirled around her ankles. She didn't pose for the crowd. She didn't smile. She just stared. The camera operator, sensing the gravity, zoomed in, past the pyro, past the sea of waving arms. It pushed in tight onto her eyes, and there was a fire there that was never there before. This wasn't the plucky hero who loved the fans. This was the woman who had fought her way back from a surgeon's table. In the ring, the Empress, the woman who had built an entire kingdom on a foundation of unshakable confidence, was visibly coming apart. Her bravado had evaporated. Her smirk was gone, replaced by a pale, twitching, animalistic fear. She clutched her championship belt not as a trophy, but as a shield. Evangeline began to walk. It was the longest walk in the history of the sport. Every step was deliberate. Every step was a message. I am not broken. The crowd was chanting her name, a deafening, unified chorus. Evangeline! Evangeline! But she didn't seem to hear them. Her gaze was locked on the champion, locked on the title. She climbed the steel steps, one by one, the sound of her boots a drumbeat under the roar. She stepped through the ropes. The arena was shaking. She was home. We cut. We are backstage, in that chaotic, high-stress tunnel just behind the curtain, a place the wrestlers call the gorilla position. This is where the magic is manufactured, and tonight, it's where the producers are in total meltdown. The head of production is screaming into his headset, his face a bright crimson. Who cleared this? Who cleared this? His eyes are wide, not with anger, but with a terrifying, exhilarating panic. This wasn't on the script. This wasn't in the production meeting. This was a secret kept at the very, very top. The other performers, the ones who were supposed to be in the next segment, their match now meaningless, are crowded around the tiny monitor. Their faces tell the entire story. There is envy. There is awe. There is pure resignation. One young rookie, who had built her entire persona on being the next Evangeline, is just openly weeping, watching her hero return. Another, a veteran, just shakes his head, a wry smile on his face. He knows the game, and the game just changed. He knows that every promo they're about to cut, every match they're about to have, means nothing. The entire world is only talking about one thing. The Empress's opponent, the one she'd just beaten, is slumped against a storage crate, her head in her hands. She was just part of the champion's dominant story. Now, she's a footnote to a miracle. The sound of one person's music just erased an entire night of programming. The show goes off the air. The broadcast feed cuts to black just as Evangeline points to the championship, a silent declaration of war. The arena is still in chaos, the fans refusing to leave. But our camera follows Evangeline. She doesn't stay in the ring to celebrate. She doesn't soak in the adulation of the crowd. She slides back onto the bottom rope, her face still a mask of impossible focus, and walks straight back up the ramp, disappearing through the curtain. The crowd roars, confused, wanting more. Backstage, she walks past the producers who are now applauding her. She walks past the other wrestlers who pat her on the back. She doesn't stop. She walks directly to the most important door in the entire building, the one marked with the name of the chairman, the head of creative. She doesn't knock. She opens it and steps inside. The door clicks shut, leaving us, the audience, and the entire company on the outside. We can only imagine the conversation. Was this a rogue act? A desperate power play? Or was this the most protected secret in the history of the business? In that moment, the championship held by the Empress became secondary. The real power, the real negotiation, was happening behind that closed door. Evangeline didn't just come back for a match. She came back for control. And as the adrenaline fades, the true unseen battle has only just begun. The next morning, the world is different. This is no longer a wrestling story. It is the story. It's the lead segment on mainstream sports networks, the anchors, who normally talk about football and basketball, fumbling to explain the sheer, visceral noise of the crowd. It's trending #1 globally, above international politics and movie premieres. The clip, filmed on a dozen shaky phones from inside the arena, is approaching 50 million views before lunchtime. The company's stock price has surged on the news. But with that explosion of mainstream attention comes a new, terrifying pressure. Evangeline's return is now a phenomenon. It's a viral moment that has transcended the bubble. She is no longer just a wrestler. She is the comeback. She is the walking, breathing symbol of hope and defiance. This is a terrifying pedestal to stand on. The media machine is building a narrative. The unstoppable hero returns from a career-ending injury to reclaim her throne. But they don't know the full story. They don't know about the 2 years of grueling, painful, monotonous rehabilitation. They don't know about the doctors who said maybe, and the others who said never. The expectation is no longer for a great match. The expectation is for a miracle. And Evangeline, now the single most watched person in the sport, knows she is a human being who has to live up to a myth. 4 a.m. A sterile, silent hotel room somewhere in the city. The television is on, the sound muted, playing the endless highlight loop of her return. The adrenaline from the pop, from the confrontation, from the high-stakes meeting in the chairman's office, has long since evaporated. All that's left is the quiet and the deep, throbbing familiar ache in her surgically repaired neck and shoulder. Evangeline sits on the edge of the bed, still in her ring gear. The roar of 20,000 people has been replaced by the faint hum of the ice machine down the hall. This is the part they don't show you in the comeback package. The loneliness of the aftermath. She picks up her phone. Her hand, the one she pointed at the champion, is trembling, just slightly. She dials a number. Her mother answers on the first ring, her voice thick with sleep and worry. "Mom," Evangeline says, and her own voice cracks, the ironclad resolve she wore in the arena shattering into a million pieces. "Mom, I did it." We don't hear the rest of the conversation. We just watch this figure who hours before seemed like a goddess curl in on herself. The tears that fall are not for the fans or for the title. They are tears of exhaustion, of fear, and of a profound personal release. She proved to the world she could return. Now she has to prove to herself that she can stay. 5 days later, the weekly television show. The entire broadcast has been built around one question. What will Evangeline say? But she doesn't open the show. Instead, the Empress walks to the ring, the championship still firmly around her waist. The crowd rains down a hellacious chorus of boos, but she just smiles. The visceral fear from the pay-per-view is gone. It has been replaced by something far more dangerous. Focus. She waits for the Evangeline chants to die down. "You all wanted a fairy tale," she begins, her voice dripping with ice. "You got your moment. You got to cry and cheer and hug each other. But the fairy tale is over." She paces the ring. Evangeline is a ghost. She's a nostalgia act. She's a one-hit wonder who came back for one more round of applause. The crowd is furious, but her words are precise, and they are surgical. She is reframing the narrative. Evangeline isn't the hero. She's the obstacle. She's the past, and the Empress is the future. You can't build a comeback on a memory, the champion snarls, looking directly into the camera. And at the Super Show, I will not just end her story. I will erase it. I will re-injure her myself. The beautiful, perfect, pure moment of the return has now been twisted. It's no longer a celebration. It's a liability. Evangeline is no longer the hunter. She is the hunted. The main event, the grandest stage. The story wrote itself. The returned hero, Evangeline, against the dominant Empress. The bell rings. They put on a masterpiece. A story of the old guard versus the new. The crowd is electric, living and dying with every move. They believe. And in the final moments, Evangeline, running on pure adrenaline, hits her signature move. The finisher. The one that won her the title all those years ago. The building is on its feet, a deafening roar. The referee's hand hits the mat. 1, 2. The Empress kicks out. A collective, heartbreaking gasp from the entire stadium. A look of pure shock on Evangeline's face. The Empress, sensing the shift, capitalizes. She locks in her brutal submission hold, targeting the surgically repaired neck. Evangeline fights. She screams. She crawls for the ropes. But the 2 years of ring rust, the weakness, it's too much. She taps out. The Empress wins, clean. The arena is stunned into a devastating silence. The champion raises her title, proving she was right. But as she celebrates, something strange happens. Evangeline, in the middle of the ring, slowly, painfully gets to her feet. The crowd, sensing this, begins to stand. They begin to clap. A slow, rhythmic, respectful ovation that grows into a roar. She lost the match, but she finished the match. And this, we realize, was the real victory. The comeback was never about the title. It was about ending her career on her own terms. Not on a gurney, not in a surgeon's office, but on her back, in the middle of the ring, having given it her all. The roar of her return wasn't for a new champion. It was the sound of a person taking back their own ending. The loss wasn't a failure. It was the epilogue she was always denied.